What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I've been walking my dog, and I've been checking out some of these videos. I'm still walking them, so you might hear them panting in the background. But about politics and the comparison of black and brown politics. And there's a few things I want to point out, all right? First of all, a lot of these videos seem to be more Southern politics versus black politics, which is not the same as raza politics. Now, the North and South have a lot in common in how they operate, but so do the blacks and whites. You know, the Woods operate real similarly to the blacks in terms of how they are not under a unified structure and banner, but it doesn't seem like people want to compare white politics and brown politics very often. So, I don't know, just something I noticed. And so there's a few things I want to address. First of all, though, if you're not in prison, I hope you're not trying to live according to prison politics standards. Now, there's some stuff we learn in the joint that translates to society. But if you're out here in the free world, enjoy that freedom. And part of that freedom is the luxury to engage with people on a person-by-person basis without being beholden to systems and structures that exist behind the wall for the safety and security of those groups involved, right? See, politics don't come out of nowhere. They're there for a reason, but they're not neutral, because politics need to be enforced by people. So that's where the hiccups come. But a couple things I hear talked about a lot. Blacks don't check paperwork. Okay, look, I'd like to know, and leave a comment, how many of you that are not black, right, have come across paperwork on a black person who's incarcerated on that yard, and you send that paperwork to their big homie or their group or whatever, and you're like, hey, bro, like, your boy told, your boy got funny charges, whatever. How often does that happen? And they turn around and say, well, we ain't gonna deal with it. It's not a big deal. I don't think very often. Like, I wonder how so many people can be so adamant about what happens in another circle of people when that's not your circle. You know, do people slip through the cracks for every group? Absolutely. Absolutely. And newsflash, it happens for the North and South too. You know, now, is there a more militant structure to the North and the South? Yes, primarily the North. But the South is very organized, right? Not necessarily militant all the time, but very organized. The difference is this. When you're from Northern California and you're a raza, you fall up under the same umbrella as everybody else from Northern California. Same thing with the South. That's the genius of the power play of these organizations in carving up halves of the state for themselves, is the control that they have, the ownership that they have over these individuals, right? When you're black or when you're white, your time in the system is a little bit different, because you're from where you're from. Oh, I'm from this county, or I might be a blood, or I might be a Crip, but I'm from this half of the state, or I'm from this hood. And so who's in charge is not such a simple answer as it is when you're talking about North and South, because they don't fall up under one umbrella. Not all Woods fall up under one umbrella. Not all blacks fall up under one umbrella. So there's a lot more diversity in leadership. There's a lot more room for people in positions of power to use that power to their advantage, right? The same thing happens with the North and the South. It doesn't happen as frequently, in the sense of there's not a half a dozen Northern shot callers on the yard or Southern shot callers on the yard, right? So by definition, that stuff works different. The politics work for the groups that impose them, right? It's from a Northern perspective, from a Southern perspective, in terms of the NF and the Mexican Mafia, the politics of everybody's under my leadership works really well, right? Because I get a chunk of all the dope coming in, probably the bigger chunk, right? I control all the activities on the yard when it comes to these people in my circle. So that's a huge advantage to those organizations. But within the woods and within the brothers, you don't generally have such large scale organizations. So they don't have the same priorities. They kind of stay in their lane with their people. From when I've been around and the folks I've been around, paperwork gets checked, people get blasted, this and that. I will say that it has appeared, for me at least at times, where there's more room for a conversation in the black car, and probably in a white car too. Because again, I think they're very similar in this way, than there is in the northern car and probably in the southern car. Because you're going to answer to people from your area for the most part, right? And people are, oh man, this female made an accusation, but we know her, we know the neighborhood, we know this dude, like we have intimate familiarity with all this stuff. So that's going to influence what our decision is. That doesn't work like that with the North and the South, because you may not even have anybody from your hood there. You know, the person in charge may not know you, may not know where you're from, may not care. And so is there more room to plead your case? A lot of times I think so. And people will decide for themselves whether that's a positive or a negative. I remember there was a kid that got sent to juvenile hall from East Palo Alto for the homicide of a child, of a baby. And they wanted to get that dude, right? And he fell up under the northern umbrella. You know, and again, this juvenile hall is teenagers, but the same thing translates to the adult system. And I was doing workshops, you know, as an outside provider. So I came through there and, oh man, we're going to get this dude. We're going to get this dude. But I knew him. And I knew the circumstances of his case. And I knew that he was not guilty of what he was being accused of. So I was able to go talk to these other youngsters and be like, hey, like all of a sudden we're just going to trust the police. We're going to trust the DA. We're going to trust that whatever they say happens really happened. Like, and you're going to down one of your own people because of this? Like, why don't you look into it a little bit more? Why don't you give homeboy a chance to find out what really happened? Because what really happened is not what they're saying happened. And he wound up being able to come out and program with the group, and ultimately he was cleared of those charges and he was set free, right? So a lot of people would say that's better justice on a gang level. You're not always afforded that in prison, in particular when you're with the North and the South, because the pressures are different and the consequences are different. But also because when you're in a black car, or if you're in a white car that's like county based or whatever, there's accountability to your neighborhood. You know, like you're dealing with people that are people that you grew up with, or the people you grew up with their people, or whatever. So you move a little different. In some ways, I would argue, honestly, that black inmates and white inmates, convicts, are able to be more authentically convicts, so to speak, than Northerners and Southerners even are. Because look, if I'm on the yard and I get disrespected by a black dude, or I get disrespected by a white dude, I can't just get off where I'm mad at, right? I gotta go get at my homies. And then my homies will get at the big homie, and then my big homies will get at their big homie, and then I'll be told what the result is. And the result might be, hey, look, bro, you gotta let that go. They're gonna take care of it. And that result was probably achieved by, you know, passing some dope or you know, whatever. But I'm left out of the equation because the program is bigger than me, right? Try to adjust this, right? Because the program is bigger than me. There's advantages to being a part of a program that's bigger than you, but there's also disadvantages. Because if you're a brother in the system, or if you're a wood in the system, and another black dude or another white dude gets on your nerves, and you're like, look, bro, we're gonna run this fade in the cell. Like, just me and you. We're gonna air it out. That's some old school convict stuff. And that's stuff that rarely happens with North and South. So there's advantages and disadvantages to the politics depending on how you look at it. and depending on what you're used to. But this whole idea that there's an entire race of people that just doesn't take the convict code serious is foolish. And the idea that there's an entire group of people that is 100% faithful to this quote-unquote convict code is also foolish. You have NF members, you have Mexican Mafia members, you have BGF members that have filed paperwork with the administration telling them, don't integrate us with the Bulldogs. Don't integrate us with the 50-50 cats. Now, I was taught that was cowardice. I was taught that wasn't allowed, personally. But it's happening, and it has happened. And I know for a fact those three groups have been involved, right? So what's allowed and what's not allowed is also very much circumstantial. People applaud the North for the militancy, right? And the discipline. Mandatory movement. You guys always got to go outside. It's funny, when I was in Sinis Valley, I had some bloods from San Diego get at me. And they were like, hey, bro, we like how your people program. You know, like when your homeboy gets out of work from behind the wall, there's always 2 people there to pick him up. And that's dope. Like, how do we get our people on that time? And so we had conversations. We're real cool. They weren't trying to be like us. They just noticed stuff in our program and was like, how did you get your program that way? And so I talked to them, right? Now, I say that to say, also in Salinas Valley, you've had NF members who don't leave the cell, who don't go to the yard, who don't go walk around. So that whole mandatory movement, all the stuff that other groups look and they're like, damn, these Norteños are disciplined. Well, since the NF been on the yard, it's a different story. It's a real different story. And the disciplines of the Southsiders, since the M been on the yard, it's a different story. We had a routine. You couldn't walk around grouped up. Now people walk around with entourages. You know, like it's... So the politics, quote unquote, are very much circumstantial. And there's really no way to say what works better or what works worse. Prison doesn't work for any of us. Prison is not good for any of us. And whatever steps and choices that individuals make to endure their time in prison, more power to them, right? That's on them. But to try to claim all high and mighty, like we get down better than you guys get down. Not everybody has the same agenda. Not everybody has the same goal. And there's this misnomer that within the North and within the South, that there's some type of purity. Cut it out. Cut it out. Folks are getting robbed. Folks are getting set up. Folks are getting told on. All that shit's happening also. Kites are getting dropped. People are getting dirty politicked. So don't act like there's some noble version of politics and then some lesser noble version of politics. No. Prison is a treacherous place filled with a lot of predators that are constantly looking for prey. And it's ugly. And that's the reality. So to compare politics, it's kind of a fool's game. There's really not a comparison. The best thing is find a way to get yourself out here, man. Walk around with your dog, right? And enjoy your life where you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Anyways, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. Take care.